By the time this video ends, you will understand why the most dangerous predator in the Rocky Mountains is not the one that roars, but the one that never makes a sound at all. Somewhere above 9,000 feet, in a stand of lodgepole pine bent sideways by decades of wind, a 200-pound cat is lying motionless on a rock ledge, her muscles coiled like a loaded spring, her amber eyes locked on a black bear tearing into a fallen elk carcass 40 yards below. She has been waiting for 11 minutes without a single twitch. What happens in the next 90 seconds will decide whether she eats tonight, whether the bear walks away wounded, or whether one of North America's most efficient killers becomes the hunted instead of the hunter. What follows is the story of the mountain lion and the black bear, two apex predators forced to share the same peaks, the same carcasses, and the same shrinking wilderness, locked in a rivalry so quiet that most people who live in cougar and bear country will go their entire lives without ever knowing it is happening around them. The Rocky Mountains stretch for more than 3,000 miles, from British Columbia down through Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and into New Mexico, forming one of the last truly wild predator strongholds left in North America. Within this vertical wilderness of granite peaks, subalpine forest, and hidden river drainages, two predators have evolved completely different blueprints for survival, and their paths cross far more often than wildlife agencies once believed. The cougar, also called the mountain lion, the puma, or the catamount depending on which part of the continent you are standing in, is built for one purpose: the perfect ambush. Every part of her body, from her retractable claws to her long muscular hind legs, exists to deliver a single explosive burst of violence after a silent approach. She can leap 20 feet in a single bound and cover 40 feet vertically up a rock face without breaking stride. A cougar does not chase prey across open ground the way a wolf does. She stalks, she calculates, and she commits to the kill only when success is nearly guaranteed, because unlike a bear, she cannot afford to be injured. A torn tendon or a broken tooth is a death sentence for a solitary predator that survives entirely on her own hunting skill. The black bear, by contrast, is built like a survival machine designed for a world of scarcity and opportunity rather than precision killing. An adult male black bear in the Rockies can weigh anywhere from 200 to over 400 pounds, more than double the weight of a full-grown male cougar, and every one of those pounds is packed with raw, blunt force power. Bears do not need to be fast or elegant. They need to be strong enough to flip boulders the size of televisions searching for grubs, to rip apart rotting logs for ants, to crush the skull of a deer fawn with a single swipe, and to intimidate almost anything else in the forest into simply walking away. Black bears are opportunists in the truest sense. They will eat berries, roots, insects, fish, carrion, and, when the opportunity presents itself, meat that another predator has already killed. That single fact, a bear's willingness to steal rather than hunt, is the spark that ignites nearly every violent confrontation between these two animals. For decades, biologists assumed cougars and black bears simply avoided each other, dividing the mountains into separate hunting grounds through some unspoken territorial agreement. Modern GPS collar studies have completely dismantled that assumption. Research conducted in Colorado, Wyoming, and British Columbia using motion-triggered cameras placed at cougar kill sites has revealed something far more dramatic. Black bears are actively tracking cougars through the mountains, using scent trails and circling ravens to locate fresh kills, and then muscling the cats off their own prey with almost total impunity. In one widely cited study from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Department, researchers found that black bears displaced cougars from their kills in a significant share of the tracked encounters, sometimes within hours of the cougar making the kill. For an animal that spends up to 2 full days stalking, positioning, and finally executing a hunt that might fail 9 times out of 10, having a bear casually walk in and claim the reward is not a minor inconvenience. It is a direct threat to survival. The mechanics of this theft are almost insulting in their simplicity. A cougar will bring down an elk calf or a mule deer, usually by delivering a precise bite to the back of the neck or throat that severs the spinal cord or crushes the windpipe, a method that leaves almost no blood trail and ends the animal's life in seconds. She will then drag the carcass, sometimes weighing more than she does, to a hidden location beneath brush or rock overhangs and cover it with leaves, dirt, and pine needles in what biologists call a cache. This cache is meant to last her for several days, allowing her to return again and again to feed without expending the massive energy required for another hunt. But a cache emits scent, and scent travels on mountain wind for miles. A black bear picking up that odor, or spotting ravens and magpies circling and calling above the site, a giveaway so reliable that researchers now use bird activity to locate carcasses themselves, will follow the trail directly to the cougar's kill. What happens next depends entirely on whether the cougar is still present when the bear arrives. In most of these encounters, the cougar chooses discretion over confrontation. She will retreat to a nearby tree or rock ledge and simply watch, sometimes for hours, as the bear tears open the carcass she risked her life to bring down. This is not cowardice, it is pragmatic restraint. A physical fight between a 140-pound cougar and a 350-pound black bear carries an unacceptable risk of injury, and an injured cougar in the wild rarely survives more than a few weeks. Bears possess thick layers of fat and dense musculature around the neck and shoulders, specifically because so much of their foraging behavior involves absorbing blunt trauma, whether from rocks, from rival bears, or from the claws of a cornered predator. A cougar's killing tools, her jaws and claws, are optimized for speed and precision against soft tissue targets like a throat or spine, not for grinding through a bear's armored bulk. In a straight physical confrontation, the mathematics overwhelmingly favor the bear. But mathematics is not destiny in the wild, and there are recorded cases that defy the expected outcome entirely. In 2018, researchers studying a radio-collared cougar in the Wind River Range of Wyoming discovered fresh black bear fur, blood, and claw mark evidence at one of her kill caches, along with signs of a violent struggle that ended with the bear retreating and the cougar retaining possession of an elk carcass. Wildlife biologists who examined the scene concluded that a young or subordinate bear had likely misjudged the encounter, approaching too aggressively and triggering a defensive strike from the cougar rather than the passive standoff that typically occurs. Cougars are exceptionally capable of delivering devastating injuries in short, explosive bursts, and a bear that presses too close during that critical window can absorb a raking swipe capable of blinding an eye or severing tendons in a paw. Injuries that, for a bear that depends on manual dexterity to forage, can become a slow and lingering death sentence long after the encounter itself has ended. Female cougars raising kittens face by far the highest stakes in this rivalry, because black bears represent one of the single greatest threats to cougar cubs in the entire Rocky Mountain ecosystem. Unlike adult cougars, kittens cannot flee up cliff faces or outrun danger, and a black bear that stumbles onto a den site, whether by scent, by accident, or by deliberate search during a lean season when other food sources are scarce, will not hesitate to kill and consume cougar kittens if the mother is not present to defend them. This grim reality shapes nearly every decision a female cougar makes during the 2 years she spends raising a litter. She dens in the most inaccessible terrain she can find, often tucked into rock crevices on cliff faces that a bear's bulk simply cannot navigate. She limits how long she leaves kittens unattended while hunting. And on the rare occasions when a bear does approach an active den site with kittens present, female cougars have been observed mounting extraordinarily aggressive defenses, launching from concealment with none of the caution they display when merely defending a meal, because in that scenario, retreat is not an option that evolution has left available to her. The seasonal rhythm of the Rockies dictates when these confrontations spike in frequency and intensity. Black bears in this region undergo hyperphagia in the late summer and early autumn, a biological state in which they must consume up to 20,000 calories a day to build the fat reserves necessary to survive 5 or 6 months of winter hibernation. During hyperphagia, a black bear's tolerance for risk changes dramatically. A bear that might normally avoid a confrontation will, driven by desperate caloric need, aggressively pursue any food source, including cougar kills, with a persistence that borders on reckless. It is precisely the season when cougar-bear conflicts spike hardest across Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming, as elk and mule deer populations funnel into lower elevation valleys ahead of winter, concentrating both predators into smaller overlapping ranges at exactly the moment bears are most food-obsessed and least cautious. Winter flips the entire dynamic on its head. As black bears enter hibernation dens sometime between October and December, depending on elevation and regional climate, the mountains effectively lose their most disruptive scavenger for 4 to 5 months. For cougars, without exaggeration, it becomes the golden season. Freed from the constant threat of having kills stolen, cougars in winter can cache a carcass and return to feed on it undisturbed for days, sometimes consuming 80% or more of an elk before moving on. Some biologists have suggested that cougar body condition and reproductive success both improve measurably during the winter months, specifically because of this temporary absence of competition, a pattern that underscores just how significant the black bear's presence is to a cougar's energy budget the rest of the year. When bears emerge from hibernation in spring, often ravenously hungry and having lost up to a third of their body weight over winter, the theft dynamic resumes almost immediately, sometimes within days of the first bear tracks appearing in the snow. Territory in cougar and bear country is rarely about fixed boundary lines, the way it might be for wolves defending a pack territory. Instead, both species operate on a fluid, overlapping system built around resource density rather than strict exclusion. A single male cougar's home range in the Rockies can sprawl across more than 100 square miles, deliberately overlapping the territories of several female cougars as well as the foraging ranges of multiple black bears, because at this scale, avoiding all contact is simply impossible. What both species have developed instead is a kind of situational avoidance, an ability to read scent marks, claw marks on trees, and scat deposits left by the other species and adjust their movements accordingly, effectively time-sharing the same physical terrain by using it at different hours, or approaching kill sites with heightened caution when fresh sign indicates the other predator was recently present. Perhaps the most fascinating twist in this entire rivalry is the role reversal that occurs when the prey in question is small, vulnerable, or already compromised. While adult black bears dominate cougars in direct confrontations over large carcasses, cougars have been recorded preying directly on black bear cubs, in rare but verified cases, particularly when a sow bear is separated from her cubs, or when cubs wander into terrain. A cougar can access more easily than the mother. These events remain uncommon, since a mother bear defending cubs is among the most dangerous animals in the entire ecosystem, willing to absorb serious injury to protect her offspring. But wildlife camera evidence from Montana has captured at least one instance of a cougar killing a yearling black bear that had become separated from its mother and was foraging alone near a rock slide. A stark reminder that in this rivalry, vulnerability, not species identity, ultimately determines who becomes prey. The economic and ecological stakes of this rivalry ripple outward through the entire Rocky Mountain food web in ways that scientists are only beginning to fully map. Cougars are what ecologists call a keystone predator, meaning their hunting pressure on elk and deer populations shapes vegetation patterns, controls herbivore overgrazing near river corridors, and indirectly supports dozens of other species, from songbirds to beavers, that depend on healthy riparian vegetation. But every time a black bear steals a cougar's kill, that cougar is forced to hunt again sooner than she otherwise would, increasing her overall kill rate to compensate for lost calories. Some researchers now theorize that black bear kleptoparasitism, the scientific term for this theft behavior, may actually be inflating cougar predation rates on elk and deer across parts of the Rockies, meaning the bear's laziness is indirectly reshaping how the entire ungulate population is managed, an unintended consequence that wildlife agencies are only now beginning to factor into elk population models. As human development continues creeping higher into traditional cougar and bear range, building subdivisions along the wildland-urban interface from Boulder to Bozeman, this ancient rivalry is being compressed into ever-shrinking pockets of viable habitat, forcing both species into higher density contact more frequently than at any point in recorded history. Wildlife managers now openly acknowledge that understanding the cougar-bear dynamic has become essential for predicting how both species will respond to habitat fragmentation, because a landscape too small to allow cougars to avoid bears entirely, or too small for bears to find enough natural forage without turning to cougar kills as a dietary staple. risks destabilizing population dynamics for both predators simultaneously. Back on that rock ledge in the lodgepole pines, the female cougar makes her decision. The black bear below has been tearing into her elk kill for almost 20 minutes, and true dusk is less than an hour away, the window in which she hunts most effectively slipping away with every passing minute. She rises silently, turns from the carcass she will not fight for, and disappears soundlessly into the timber, already recalculating, already beginning the search for the next opportunity in a mountain range where survival belongs not to the strongest animal, nor even to the most skilled hunter, but to whichever predator can most efficiently adapt to losing far more often than it wins. In the endless, silent war between the cat that stalks and the bear that steals, there are no permanent victors, only two extraordinary survivors, locked together by hunger, by terrain, and by millions of years of evolution, sharing the same peaks until one of them, eventually, does not.